know that humans have used advanced genetic engineering technology, conspiring to break the boundaries of life by creating species that did not exist on Earth. These acts of nature to human cross-border behavior seem to have been prevented but may expedite in the future generation. To prevent members of different species from propagating offspring or ensure that any offspring are sterile, reproductive isolation occurs. Reproductive isolation is an important factor in biological distinction because it maintains the integrity of a species by reducing gene flow between related species. Geographic isolation is a term that refers to a population of animals, plants, or other organisms that are separated from exchanging genetic material with other organisms of the same species. These are physical barriers that exist to keep two species from mating. For example, a species of monkey that is located on an island cannot breed with another species of monkey on the mainland. The water and distance between the two species keep them isolated from one another and make it impossible for them to breed. Ecological isolation, or habitat isolation, occurs when two species that could interbreed do not because the species live in different areas. For example, lions and tigers belong to the same family, but lions live mainly on the African continent and non-tropical rainforest, while tigers live mainly in the wetlands of southern Asia. These two species differ under natural conditions and habitats and will not encounter one another. Each is isolated from the other species. Behavioral isolation is different biological mating behaviors. It also refers to the fact that many species perform different mating rituals. For example, certain species of crickets will only mate with males that produce a particular mating song. Other species' rituals may include a mating dance or emitting a scent. These clues are ignored by species, not accustomed to the ritual. Between groups of species that makes a close relationship, hybrids are not easy to succeed after fertility. Although it can form a zygote-fertilized egg cell, the probability of the cell surviving is very low. Though it can survive, but the embryos die at a certain stage. Lastly, the hybrid sterility is defined as the inhibition or suppression of the reproductive capacity of F1 or later generation hybrids between genetically different strains or populations, usually belonging to different species. This is how nature itself isolates living things, and it is a reproductive isolating mechanism which functions to prevent the exchange of genes between populations. For example, mule is the result of female horse crossed with a male donkey. Mules are sterile, thus there is no potential for gene flow. In terms of evolution, it is a dead end. Therefore, reproductive isolation is important in controlling the reproduction of Earth species. Without reproductive isolation, most species in the world will inevitably lead to chaos throughout nature. The most terrible thing that may happen is that it will produce some terrible diseases that may affect human genes and genes of other organisms. It will destroy the stable genetic structure of human beings. New species at this time can suffer from a variety of diseases, and these diseases have almost no cure. This horrible phenomenon may uncontrollably spread across the globe. Human beings may become extinct as a result. Reproductive isolation protects the stability of our genes so that human beings can develop and evolve more steadily. Any cross-species hybridization experiment is very risky. Humans, apes, and chimpanzees are very close related because it shares 98.9% DNA. Does this mean humans, apes, and chimpanzees can crossbreed an offspring? Humans and chimpanzees are divided around 6 to 8 million years ago. That's why humans and chimpanzees start to evolve separately and become two different species. Generally speaking, related creatures and reproductive isolation occurs every 100,000 years. If it is natural mating, human sperms are no longer possessed in the chimpanzee's reproductive tract because these human sperms cannot be identified by chemical signals from chimpanzees' egg cells. In other words, the sperm and egg cell cannot be fertilized successfully by manual means. The fertilized eggs develops directly into chromosomes with DNA molecules with linear structure in the nucleus, carrying a biological genetic information. All chromosomes in a certain cell contains all the genetic information of this organism. The organisms can reproduce in the next generation depends whether the chromosomes can be combined with different species. One species have different numbers of chromosomes. Human sperm have 23 chromosomes, and chimpanzees' eggs have 24 chromosomes. When combined, it will have 47 chromosomes. You can find plural chromosome to continue dividing at this point because the cell will stop dissociating. This is called apoptosis. It simply means that human and chimpanzee cells cannot be combined at all. Crosses require consistent genomes. The number of chromosomes in their cells and structure must be consistent, and humans have more than 98% homology with chimpanzees. In terms of gene number and structure, chromosome and genome structure of humans and chimpanzees are almost identical, conceiving that humans with 46 pairs of chromosomes and chimpanzees with 48 pairs of chromosomes can be born with a certain probability. There are 47 mixed breeds of chromosomes back in the 1990s. Researchers discovered 2 chromosomes of a chimpanzee. Its shape can be roughly spliced into human chromosome. The 2 chromosomes of chimpanzees are 2A and 2B, and the human chromosomes are 12 and 13. For example, horses have 64 chromosomes, and donkeys has 62 chromosomes. The number of chromosomes of the hybridization pupae is 63, and the offspring of the cross also have a certain probability of fertility. For example, a female tiger in Kolkata Zoo, India, successfully paired with a male lion. She gave birth to 7 but eventually died of disease at the age of 8 or 9. Equal chromosome could not be isolated by pairs, but the probability of childbirth, however, is not impossible. This is not an exception because this phenomenon has completely impacted scientific understanding of biogenetics. We still have a long way to go in genetic engineering if the offspring of an ape hybrid can survive. The question is it theoretically possible for the genetic science to reproduce an ape-human hybrid? Has anyone in this world ever done such an experiment? Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov, former Tsarist and former Soviet Union famous reproductive biologist, expert in artificial insemination and animal hybridization. The zebra and donkey offspring, zebra donkey in 1910, World Congress of Zoologists in Austria, revealed the hope through artificial insemination to try the possibility of humans crossing with other primates. This caused great controversy at that time since he was held being against the newly formed Soviet government. He put forward this research plan but failed in 1920s, so he came to French Guinea in West Africa and carried out this research at an experimental base, but due to lack of funds, the study was stalled. Ivanov returned to Moscow to present the experiment plan to the government again. Why does Ivanov is so attached to this experiment? Some say he was only studying the relationship between humans and apes. Others consider him a downright science lunatic. The Soviet government in the 1920s began to move closer to world-class countries in industrial strength. Top government think Ivanov's research will be a decisive blow to religion and can be used appropriately for publicity for free working people from church power, so the government approved the plan in November 1926. Ivanov and his son came back to the experimental base in French Guiana. They hired locals to catch and care for the chimpanzees for and start preparing for the experiment. The direction of their initial experiment is to conceive a female chimpanzee with human sperm. The two chimpanzees they have used in the experiment was named Babette and Civette. It is said that the sperm to be used that time was Ivanov's own sperm due to many reasons, since the experiment was a bit hazy and there was a lack of relatively professional instruments, hence, to also avoid local suspicion. This reduces the chance of successful experiment to some extent. After a few months, Ivanov conducted a second experiment. The object this time is called block number 25. The experiment is not over here yet. They have to consider another more serious problem because the funds is running out. Ivanov counts on success after his experiment can get offsprings of apes. By then, he asked the Soviet government for more research budgets. In fact, this experiment was performed only 3 times. The chances of success are very uncommon. Ivanov had to leave Africa back to the Soviet Union, but he did not give up the research and continue on Sukhumi on the Black Sea Research Institute. He reversed the direction of the experiment and switched to chimpanzee sperm and human female. He then found 5 female volunteers. All 5 women signed in an agreement and voluntarily underwent strict isolation after the experiment. According to the agreement, these chimpanzees were euthanized after obtaining sperm. The last chimpanzees arrived in 1930s. This time draws on previous experience. Ivanov said he will soon be able to successfully breed apes, but this time, political turmoil suddenly subsists in the Soviet scientific community. Ivanov and these participating scientists were arrested. They were exiled to Kazakhstan, and the experiment was also forced to suspend less than 2 years. Ivanov died in exile. Late 1990s, Russian science fiction and writer Anton Panov claimed he had gotten a confidential document himself. The plan for Stalin's training of ape troops is described above. It turned out that the Soviet government wanted Ivanov secretly created a real version of the blood ape. If the experiment is successful, this ape warrior will not know the pain. Tirelessly and endless power can be an invincible super soldier. Of course, the truth of this rumor is relatively low, because Ivanov wanted to do this research from beginning to end. The Soviet government also provided very little funding. There is a virus spreading in Cameroon, Africa, and it was reportedly originated from chimpanzees and gorillas. SIV stands for Simian Immunodeficiency Virus. SIV is a known virus in the world of apes, not as scary as imagined. To humans, it gradually evolved into today's HIV virus. HIV/AIDS. The puzzling thing is, whether it is HIV or SIV transmission, it have to go through body fluid exchange. HIV is not transmitted by mosquitoes or air transmission. In other words, the first human must exchange fluids with chimpanzees to get HIV from 1920s. One that can contribute to HIV group 1M virus begins to spread in DRC and then the Bangaldo in the Republic of the Congo live in the same areas as the chimpanzees. It is said that indescribable behavior between humans and chimpanzees has occurred, but as mentioned earlier, under natural conditions, chimpanzees are impossible to conceive, so no hybrid offsprings of chimpanzees have been reported, but in the process, the most terrible HIV was created, and 1920 happened to be Ivanov's time for ape experiment in French Guinea. In West Africa, the HIV epidemic related to Ivanov made people have to associate with their own relative opinions, of course. Reproductive isolation is important for protecting population genes. Independence between population has evolved over millions of years. The hasty combination of experiments will have terrible consequences, especially if someone attempted to artificially intervene with its natural law. Human curiosity is very powerful. There are some scientists who lack morality and responsibility, conducting various unethical experiments. Although the essence of science is to explore all scientific possibilities, it doesn't serve humanity in order to test some insane and lunatic experiments that may result in an extreme disrespect for life. Reproductive isolation established by nature is the best protection for life. Violation of the laws of nature will be punished by nature, and this punishment is those terrible virus, so let's cherish life away from gorillas. This is Vivo Movies and Mystery Cases. Feel free to leave us a comment down below for more video suggestions, topics, and ideas. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more updates. Thank you for watching!